Hello everyone, I am your best friend Ajay Shetty and today I am going to read a book by Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond is a writer who was born in Himalayas. He writes the best stories and always writes stories about the places of Himalayas like Mussoorie and Tehri. I love all of his books. I have many books of Ruskin Bond. I have books like From the Cradle of Nature, The Blue Umbrella, and the Kipling Road, and many more. Now today I am going to read the story From the Cradle of Nature. It is a very popular story written by Ruskin Bond. So let's start reading the story. So the first story in this book is The Angry River. The next video link will be in the description box. Now let's start. In the middle of a big river, there was a small island. The river swept around the island, sometimes plowing at its banks, but never going right over it. It was over 20 years since the river had flooded the island, and that time no one had lived there. But for the last 10 years, a small mud-walled hut with a sloping thatched roof stood there. The hut had been built into a huge rock, so only 3 of the walls were made up of mud, and the 4th was the rock. Goats grazed on the short grass which grew on the island and on the prickly leaves of thorn bushes. A few hens followed them about. There was a melon patch and a vegetable patch. In the middle of the island stood a peepal tree. It was the only tree there and was the biggest tree ever. Even during the great flood, when the island had been underwater, the tree stood firm. It was an old tree. Now you know Indians love peepal trees. So there were 3 people living in the house. One, Sita, her grandmother and her grandfather. They used to love the peepal tree, and Sita loved to climb the peepal tree. It was the sacred tree with the abode of spirits, good and bad. Don't yawn when you're sitting beneath the tree, grandmother used to warn Sita. And if you must yawn, you should snap your fingers in front of your mouth. If you forget to do that, a spirit might jump down your throat. And then what will happen? Asked Sita. It will probably ruin your digestion, said grandfather, who wasn't much of a believer in spirits. The people had a beautiful leaf, and grandmother likened it to the body of the mighty god Krishna, broad at the shoulders. then tapering down to a very slim waist. It was an old tree. An old man sat beneath it. He was mending a fish net. He had fished in the river for 10 years. He had taught his son to fish. But his son had gone to work in a factory in a city, nearly 100 miles away. He had no grandson, but he had a granddaughter, Sita. She could do all the things that a boy could do, and sometimes she could do them better. She had lost her mother when she was very small. Grandmother had taught everything she knew, but neither of her grandparents could read or write. And as a result, Sita could not read or write either. But there was a school in one of the villages across the river, but Sita had never seen it. There was too much to do in the island. While grandfather mended his net, Sita was inside the hut, pressing her grandmother's forehead, which was hot with fever. Grandmother had been ill for 3 days and she could not eat. She had been ill before, but she had never been so bad. When Sita noticed that grandmother had fallen asleep, she tiptoed out of the room on her bare feet and stood outside. The sky was dark with monsoon clouds. The monsoon rains had come early at the end of June. Now it was the middle of July, and already the river was swollen. Its rushing sound seemed nearer and menacing than usual. Sita went to her grandfather and sat down beside him beneath the peepal tree. "When you are hungry, tell me," she said, "and I will make the bread." "Is your grandmother asleep?" She sleeps, but she will wake soon, for she has a deep pain." The old man stared across the river. At the dark green of the forest, at the grey sky, and said, "Tomorrow, if she is not better, I will take her to the hospital at Shurganj. You may be on your own for a few days, but you have been on your own before." Sita nodded gravely. She had been alone before, even during the rainy season. Sita was not afraid of being alone, but she did not like the look of the river. That morning, when she had gone down to fetch water, she had noticed that the level had risen. "Grandfather, if the river rises, what should I do?" Grandfather said, "You will keep high to the ground, and if the water reaches the high ground, then take the hens into the hut and stay there," said Grandpa. And if the water comes into the hut, then climb the peepal tree. It is a strong tree. It will not fall. And the water cannot rise higher than the tree. And the goat's grandfather said, I will be taking them with me, Sita. I may have to sell them to pay for good food and medicines for your grandmother. And as for the hens, if it becomes necessary, put them on the roof. But do not worry too much, Sita. I will come back soon, and the water will not rise so high. And won't grandmother come back? Yes, of course. But they may keep her in the hospital for some time. Towards very evening, it began to rain. Big pellets of rain scarring the surface of the river. But it was warm rain, and Sita could move about in it. She was not afraid of getting wet. She rather liked it. In the previous month, when the monsoon season had arrived, she was not scared. It washed the dusty leaves of the tree and brought up the good smell of the earth, and she had run about shouting for joy. She was used to it now, and indeed little tired of the rain. But she did not mind getting wet. She walked about barefooted and bare-legged. She was very sure on her feet. Her toes had grown accustomed to gripping all kinds of rocks, slippery or sharp. Although thin, but she was very strong. She had moved about in the pouring rain, chasing the hens into a shelter behind the hut. A harmless brown snake fluttered out of its hole. It was moving across the open ground. Sita picked up a stick, scooped the snake up, and dropped it in a cluster of rocks. She had no quarrel with snakes. They just kept down rats and frogs. When Sita finally went indoors, she was very hungry. She ate some dried peas and warmed up goat's milk. Now grandmother woke once and asked for water. Grandfather held the brass tumbler to her lips. It rained all night. The roof was leaking. A small puddle formed on the floor. They kept the kerosene lamp alight. They don't need the light, but it made them feel safer. The sound of the river had always been with them, but that night they noticed a change in its sound. There was something like a moan in the wind, like a wind in the top of tall trees, and a swift hiss as the water swept around the rocks and carried away the pebbles. Sita could not sleep. She had a rag doll made with grandmother's help out of bits and of old clothing. She kept it by her side every night. The doll was someone to talk to. When the nights were long and when the nights were long and sleep elusive, her grandparents are ready to talk. But sometimes Sita wanted to have secrets, and though there were no special secrets in her life, she made up a few, but it was fun to have secrets. Since there were no other children on the island, Sita shared her secrets with the rag doll, whose name was Mumta. So we have reached to page number 16. Now I will come back tomorrow with the second part. We will continue from the page number 16. So please like and subscribe if you like this video, and click the bell icon. Bye.